And so it begins. Dude, you've been on. This is the third time now you've been on the channel. I'm gonna have to start paying you. I'm gonna have to start paying you soon.
Oh, nonsense! Don't become a shill.
So, hello everyone, and welcome to the Shootout Podcast. I'm your host Ross Baxter, and today is episode 97 of the series. As always, the podcast is a weekly series where I bring on guests from the film and game industries to talk about their journey, thoughts on education, you name it, folks. We talk about it here. But today's main topic, once again, we're going to be diving into the world of modelling and a lot of side topics that I don't think many people have been talking about as of late when it comes to podcasts and interviews. And as always, the best man when it comes to this, I wanted to get Ruairidh back on the show because he knows so much different things in the industry. So Ruairidh, it's a pleasure having you. Thanks for coming on.
No worries, thank you very much for having me. So I'm just turning the volume off and I always forget to do it. There we are. Yeah, thank you very much for having me back on. It's going to be, I think it'll be an interesting one with all this lockdown. I've not had a chance to speak to anyone, so you're going to get all my drivel, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's all right, man. I could talk for days, like I said. We could talk for, here. To be honest, right, depending on how this goes, it might be a few hours, man.
Game on.
And so it begins. It's gonna be nuts. So, I obviously know you, etc. But anyone who's not listened to the previous podcast, we'll just start off with good old introductions as always. Just tell us a wee bit about yourself, and then we'll dive into the madness.
Yeah, so if you ever come across me online, you'll probably see it as Rue because my first name is a bit of a pain to spell. So I'm a 3D modeler, currently very, very freelance due to all this lockdown stuff. But before that, I was working over at Framestore. Working on stuff like Endgame, Alita, Battle Angel, Fantastic Beasts, things like that. I've been doing that for the last good while, and on the sideline, I've been going on unis and trying to help students kind of improve or figure out what they need to do to be able to come and join the industry, so they don't get that kind of stuck in their bedroom thing, and they can make something with their lives and do that great thing when you get to turn around and stick your tongue out at everyone who said artists can't make money.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. So thank you for coming back on, and as always, folks, like I said, if you guys want to hear the full story and journey of Rue, obviously I'll call him Ruairidh because I know how to say his name. We're both from we're doing EC, pronouncing it perfectly. Just because I'm from Scotland, I'm from the exact same city, and I've lots of friends called Ruairidh. That's the thing, man. Just speaking of your names, like I always confuse, like I get so confused. Like, how can people not pronounce it? It's like it's Ruairidh, and they're like, wait, what?
Come to London for a day. It's interesting.
Right. I guess it's easy for me to say because my name's Ross. Nice and simple. Right. So today's main topic, we'll be diving in, like I said, modelling. But we're going to be kind of diving into because Ruairidh's background is both in film and game. Like he's done both worlds, etc. And we're going to be diving into the other side of modelling. Like in the previous podcast, we dived into portfolios, etc. We might introduce a few things from portfolios, but I want to kind of add a different spin on it with this one. And we're going to actually start with a difficult question. It's a big question to kind of kick things off, man. So prepare yourself. It's what do you think is like the difference and similarities between game and film when it comes to a modeler?
Well, right now, employability, that's a big one at the moment.
Yeah.
Games are hiring, films isn't, so that's very useful at the moment. That's why I'm looking at making a transition over to games, just because I'd quite like to be able to pay my rent. But I think the main difference is it's kind of a mentality, because we're working with films. If you're in a bigger studio, it's more as there's no limitation. I can throw as many polygons as I want at a model. It doesn't matter. We've got a render farm. It'll work. And then the negative side of that is you can become quite lazy as a modeler because you're not thinking about being kind of putting geometry in the right place. You're not thinking about being efficient because you don't need to be. So why would you worry about it? But it's switching over to the game side of things. It's you kind of do that initial phase of doing your high res model before you bake down. But then you've got to be very intelligent, thinking where can you spend your polygon budget? Where's worth putting more polys? Where do you need to cut back? And you need to really think about it, and not just the model, but how the model is going to work and react and everything. I think it's a much more complicated thought process doing games. And the films is cool because you get to have the really cool stuff at the end, but it's just a completely different mindset on it. I think as well with the film side of it, there's a bit more pressure because you don't have to do all that baking side of things. It's just the schedule is so much shorter. because they don't schedule in like a couple of days to do your low poly, a couple of days to do your bake. Like if we make a model, we have to build an anim res one while we're going, and it's all in the same schedule. There's no split up. Just essentially, like, if you're a glutton for punishment, film's a good way to go. If you like a bit more time to breathe, maybe games is a bit better. But I think it depends on company. It's quite a generalization, but that's your main difference there.
Yeah, because one of the main reasons why I wanted to kind of dive into this kind of area today was the fact that there's still lots of things that I feel is, I wouldn't say is misleading, but when it comes to education, like everyone obviously has their pros and cons, etc. for education, but when it comes to actually getting explained what the industry is about, there's not that much knowledge about it, because I understand obviously studios can't say so much and it makes sense. Yep. But it would be great to see more actually kind of what to actually expect in the industry. So when we were talking previously in the previous podcast and also in the live stream, we were talking about once again speed, etc., and what's it actually like versus making your own personal portfolio. Because when you're making a personal portfolio, like there's no pressures, there's no deadlines or whatsoever, and I feel like so many different things could be kind of expanded upon in education around this topic. And actually, kind of just diving deeper into it. Is there anything specific you think education should be teaching more about when it comes to the industry itself, like the actual on the job?
I think the easiest way, honestly, to do it at the moment would be it's just modify the way it works, because that's certainly a trap I've been caught in before. You know yourself, in that student phase, like hand in your essay this time next month, and then the day before you panic and you type it out like mad because you're given that breather. Yeah, that's pretty much the same way it works for us. It's just that we have regular checkups. Like I know in a month I've got to have a model ready, but every 2 days I'm going to be checked to make sure I'm working, or to show what I'm doing to make sure I'm going in the right direction. I think even that would be a good step, but rather than just, and it's I'm only going on my own experience here, but I know that you can't trust students based on the way I've done things. If I'm given a month, I'll spend 2.5 weeks doing absolutely nothing before I actually get off my bum. So I think even just introducing that, like a 2-day checkup, or simply like I don't know, some kind of, you've got to upload your model somewhere, some drive or something, just something that forces you to be working every couple of days so you don't get caught in that lull. I think that would be a good start, because you can't really learn what to do for a studio, because like I could teach you all the ways that I've learned to do things at Framestore, and I mean you'd learn how to do them fine. But then even if I've got all that information, but then I go see to another studio, like if I went to ILM or MPC or something, most of the knowledge I've got is pretty useless because they've got their own entirely different way of doing things. So I don't think you can really blanket teach it. It's more just you've got to get that kind of discipline in place first of, spending the right amount of time working and how to approach it, and kind of how to approach it in a timely manner to make sure you can get to the deadline.
Of course.
I think it seems to be something like that, because I think everybody who studies 3D, you don't kind of accidentally fall into it. It's something you pretty much choose, or you've got some kind of knowledge about doing. I think it's just finding the right way to motivate people. I mean, you probably know yourself, when you start a project, it can be quite soul destroying when the first hour you don't have this amazing, perfect 3D scene. You've still got a cube with maybe like a door on it, and it's quite disheartening. You're like, I spent an hour and I've got nothing. So and you just need something to kind of break through that and encourage folks to actually be regularly working.
Yeah. Because you mentioned so many great topics there, and one of the ones that you said there was one of the things that really hurt me in terms of the production side of things was my speed. So I've talked about this to you in the past, in the sense that like I love designing things when I'm doing like my Harry Potter stuff and all my furniture, etc. But that's completely different to when I'm doing hard surface. Like the game completely switches, and it's all about efficiency at the end of the day. And one of the biggest shockers, so I reached out to one of my favorite artists and I asked him how long, and I also reached out to you. I asked two people the same question. So one of the artists called Ognian, he did this Harry Potter stuff in Unreal that I've been following his work for years. And I also reached out to you asking how long would you expect for this to be done in the industry? And I got such a wake-up call when you explained this to me. You're like, Ross, you're going to have to speed this up. Obviously, you didn't say it that way, but you know what I mean? Yeah. It's all about being a lot quicker. Do you think, like I know you said you can't really be taught as much for the industry, but do you think the only safety thing you can do is just focus on speed?
No.
Right, okay, interesting.
The speed comes, like it'll come naturally. Like when you come in as a junior, they're not expecting you to work at a senior's rate, because it'd be ridiculous. Like there's kind of concession for that. I think the bit that's more important is to learn where to put the effort, because I've done, when I was kind of starting out, a few kind of projects similar to the one you're doing with your submarine dock. It's this huge, big, massive environment. There's so much detail in, and I think it's as well as I see a lot of people get caught with the same thing in ZBrush. Is you go in so quickly and you'll focus in on like the eye and start putting in poor details, or maybe there'll be some building in the background that you detail the hell out of, but in reality you're never going to see it. I think it's just that learning where to actually spend your time, because even if you're not going fast enough, fine, as long as you're spending the time you are using on something useful, much better, because then other people can pick up the background stuff and do it, or you can rip apart your foreground and use it for the background. I think that's just the big trap, is you want to put in too much detail too quickly, and I think a lot of the fear is that you're trying to impress. Like certainly, I remember when I've started studios, like the first week, you burn yourself out just because you want to show, look how good I can do this stuff. This is why you're paying me. Please keep paying me. And it's like, no, just take a breath, work on the thing that actually matters, and you make yourself a useful employee. Because you burn yourself out in a week trying to show off, it's not going to do any good. You want to show, like, I know I'm not the fastest. I know these are my weaknesses, but look, I know that this is a bit I've got to work on, and I'm spending the money you're giving me wisely. Essentially, I'm not wasting it. I'm working on this because I know this is needed for this shot. And then later on, this thing in the background, I can do that later on, or somebody else can pick it up when there's time. But the thing we need for this shot, I'm putting my effort on that. I think that's way more important, because like the speed thing, even if you were to spend, I don't know, a year doing nothing but learning Maya shortcuts, like you could become an absolute master of them. But then when you join a studio and they've got all custom tools, custom pipeline, custom plugins with completely new shortcuts, all that stuff you've learned, it'll be handy, but it won't help you with all the new stuff.
Yeah, it's all decision making. There's I understand that there's a lot to obviously take in, but I completely agree with you. And yes, I know we're not going to be diving as much into portfolio, but I do have one question about portfolio before we continue the discussion. Is, do you think the more boring the prop, the better it is? So, do you want me to elaborate on what I mean by that?
Well, I get what you mean there. Yeah, I think that does. It certainly does help, because I mean everything. I've got ArtStation open here just now, and there's about 50 cars and 40 guns, and it's the cool, fancy stuff. But I can't remember the name of the guy. I saw him on LinkedIn the other day. If I find the name, I'll post it on to you later on. But I've been watching this guy working. It's actually really like it. It's just a really simple thing. He's making a Stanley knife, fairly mundane prop, but he's going through it step by step, and like he's got a Stanley knife, like a real one. He's working from reference, and all these renders, he's putting the reference image and his one side by side, and it's a pretty simple model. But then watching his process of how he's gone about it, watching his edits, and he goes back and reviews it, and how he's been doing his texture reference and stuff, it's super cool, because rather than wasting time looking at trying to see 50 replicated bolts, is one bolt replicated 50 times in a gun, which kind of looks cool, but it's not actually that much work. Like seeing something simple and seeing their process is much cooler, much more interesting, because I get an eye for how they're working, rather than just they've covered everything in loads of detail to hide mistakes. It's like, no, this is super simple. It's like if you ever watch MasterChef, it's always that same thing. It's like the guy who makes a thing with 50 ingredients, and then there's a guy who just makes like 2 ingredients. Like, wow, you smashed it. And same kind of idea. Just keep it simple and do it really well. Much better than like a huge thing.
Yeah, nah, because that's a great answer. Because I understand when you're getting taught, you always get told to be, and like me, just the type of person I am. I'm always like, be bold, be crazy, be inspirational, and that. But there comes a point when you kind of have to realize that a lot of these kind of inspirations, like, I'm not trying to take away the passion of being in the industry, but you don't get that creative freedom all the time. Like, there's not really, and to be the way I said it is probably a bit of an understatement as well. Like, there's it's very specific tasks to be done. There's obviously, depending on the studio size, whether it's small versus big studios, we're going to be diving into that as well. Same for cities, etc. But it was a question that I've always wanted to ask someone. I've never really thought about it, but it's like, when it comes to just making the right portfolio, just choosing props that are just things you see on a daily basis, like you said about tools, etc. Like, just make them and do your best to make it and understand the process. So On you go.
Say as well, pick something you don't want to make. Really
Interesting.
important.
Yeah, good choice, right?
Because I think that's when I first started in working 3D. That was the first month it was like soul destroying.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd spent all my time only making things I wanted to make. And then when it was like, this is your task to make this thing, but I don't want to make it. Like, yeah, but that's your job to make that.
Yeah.
Like, I think get used to that quickly. Get used to it before your boss sees the look of disappointment on your face when you're like, I don't want to do that. Just you've got to make it,
Yeah.
regardless. And I think it's better as well because then you'll challenge yourself. Like you'll make like I think I did about yourself. I was making portfolio pieces. I picked things I thought were interesting and I knew how to make them.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you pick something you don't like and like maybe like a really random bolt will come up or something. You're like I've no idea how to approach that, and you might just skip it. Whereas if you force yourself, like no, this is my task, you'll learn much more.
Yeah. Like when it comes to my portfolio, so to answer your question there, I would say I've been. It's weird. So I would say I've been safe when it comes to furniture because that's my comfort zone. That's the area that I like to do. But when it comes to my environments, I always go extreme, and that's my downfall. Well, it pays off. Like I learned a lot from making my environments, etc., and learning hard surface and learning design, and most importantly, the point you said right at the start. Like giving something a purpose, like why is it there in the first place? Like, is it going to be shown? Because I'm writing a book and trying to make a short film out of there's lots of shots that need to be seen from different angles and approached. Therefore, I'm going to have to figure all this out, and it's learning how to be smart, breaking things down. So I go crazy with layers, and that's just the way I keep things structured. But one of the questions I wanted to ask is, what are the different types of modelers? Because I know there's lots of types of modelers in game and film. For example, you've got your organics, you've got your hard surface, and can you kind of break down the different types? It'd be interesting here because I know there's more than the two.
It's kind of a tough one to break down because you've got to be able to kind of do all of them essentially. You need to be versatile enough.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I'll speak from just Framestore for example here from working there because that's the best examples I've got of kind of high end stuff. We didn't have different kind of modelers. Like I see a lot of people like they specifically want to be like a weapons artist or a car artist or something like that.
Yeah,
maybe in like a very specific studio that could work. I think that would be more for games. Maybe you'll take on like like a company that makes like Call of Duty or something. You're going to be guaranteed to be making guns.
mm-hmm.
But like at Framestore or film companies, they're not just making one type of thing. They're making all sorts. So that you will not get hired as a gun artist or like a shoe artist. You'll just get hired as a modeler. And what they essentially do is they will split it into the either or like kind of hard surface or organic based on your skills. But they'll do that before they've even hired you. They'll look at your portfolio and kind of like, yep, this is what's useful, this is what's not. And then as you're working as a junior role, you'll be given a bunch of different stuff to do. And it kind of works in the principle of whatever one you start to excel at, they'll start giving you more of that kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you're like I was really good at hard surface environments because I could just smash them out quickly. So I started getting more and more hard surface environments. As one, I think it's an important one if you're going to take things in that approach. Like if you're going to go for films rather than games, it sounds kind of silly, but you got to be very careful at what you get good at. Because like if you if one day you go in and you're super pumped up and hyped and you make like the most amazing rock that the world has ever seen, there might be a chance that suddenly for the next film you're going to spend the next 9 months of your life making absolutely nothing but rocks because you smashed one out one day. So like maybe you're not so much into making rocks, for instance. So like if you it's kind of dangerous and like a silly game to play, but you have got to think about where your passion lies, and you've got to put equal effort into like everything that you're making. But maybe like if it's something you really, really enjoy, like stay an extra half hour after your shift's finished just to add a wee extra polish, or maybe message your boss and be like, I really enjoyed making that or something.
Mm-hmm.
They won't give you that specific work. Like, it'll change all the time. But if you can at least make yourself known as the person who likes to do it or is good at it, that's more the kind of the way it works for that. Because there's really not a you don't really get hired
for specific things.
Thing. I mean, apart from like kind of like face shape modelers, they're very specific.
Okay.
But that's I think it's a completely different art form in itself. I think that's more to do with rigging and anatomy than anything else. Because we've had a bunch of people in it. That's all their job is just to come in and do face shapes for characters.
Yep. Like there's No,
doesn't appeal to me. But
it's a tough question. I appreciate you answering that, man, because there's a lot to it. Like especially in film, like I was doing my presenting for Cave Academy, and I was learning the whole background for digi-doubles, and it's a whole other world that I did not expect. Like doing like the posing for that, and using all these other softwares that I've never even heard of until I started having to study it for my presenting, etc. And like you said, there the main part there, which I know we've talked about briefly in the previous podcast, is film is more generalist based. And like speaking of generalist, like your portfolio, like you can literally make anything. Like when I see when you're on your live streams on Twitch, and having that, like that's the thing that completely separates you between me. Like I know for a fact that I've got my comfort zone, and that's been a hindrance to my career in terms of my ability to grow, because I'm so kind of in my comfort zone of this is what I like to do. And obviously my main passion is talking and presenting. That's why I'm pursuing this as a career. But thanks for answering that, because I know it's a tough question, and I know there'll be lots of people wondering, is it better to be a generalist or is it better to be a specialist? So hopefully that does help you guys out. So when it comes to this is a fun one, because I love this. I'm intrigued. You're just smiling like, what's he gonna ask me, man? This is madness.
a dull day.
So, likeness pieces versus creative freedom versus just refining assets. So I understand, obviously this depends on like the experience of the artist, so juniors, seniors, etc., leads and so forth. When it comes to starting out, what kind of modeling should people expect, and when can they start doing more things that are more creative freedom based? And once again, I know you said it does depend, because they don't necessarily specialize all the time, but you know what I mean? When
I mean, if for working or for doing your own stuff?
So working.
It can pretty much happen whenever. The way around it is, if you're wanting to do it quickly, like if you've not built, essentially you got to build a reputation in the office for yourself, and there's not a moment, there's not like a goal that you've got to hit for that to happen. It's essentially each film you kind of restart. That's kind of a nice side about it, is like you will have a general reputation, but for each film, you pretty much have to restart that process, because you'll have a different CG supervisor. So like the boss for the film, each film will have essentially a different boss. That's the one you need to impress, because that's the one who has the vision for the film that you're working on, and that's the one who decides whether you get to be creative or you stick exactly to the letter of what they say. So eventually, after you worked enough, you'll have worked with all of them, and you know, the kind of the circle goes around again, but that takes a while. The way that essentially I went about it, and I've seen a lot of people go about it, is you do to the letter what they've asked for.
Okay.
But then what you also do is you'll make, like, so we do like our dailies, and you go in every single day, and cinema screen, your work goes up, and it'll normally be 4 or 5 images of different angles with reference images, and that's to show what you've made and why you've made it. And then when I was first starting there, what I would do is you maybe add like an extra 2 at the end, where you've done a change, or you've maybe done like a twist, and you've been like, you know, I saw this image online, so you put the reference photo of the thing you saw online, and then you change the model or the thing a bit. You know, I saw this, I think that's really, really cool, and like, here's an example of how it could look. So like, you've done all the work that you need to do, but you're also doing like, and you know, I also think this could be a good idea. And that's kind of how you start it. And then the guy's like, yo, yeah, I wasn't thinking. You bear in mind, like a CG suit, he's looking at every single asset for the film, so he doesn't have time to sit and like spend 2 hours researching 50 different variations of like a cup or something. He just sees a cup he likes, okay, make this cup. But you know, because you've got a day to make it, you can sit on Google and play around, and because you're not thinking about entire film. So I think that's a good way to do it. Is just like, do the work, within at the end of your submissions, maybe put in like 2 or 3 frames of like some ideas. A lot of the time they won't even look at them, or like they won't care. It's like, no, that's not what I asked for. But it's not about the victories of that. It's just showing that, you know, you can think for yourself, and that you can stick to a brief, but also add a wee bit extra to it, or, you know, given a bit of opportunity, you can create something a bit more. And then you'll just start getting stuff one day when like the briefs will start getting less defined. Essentially, you'll be getting like a model, and like, okay, so we want it based on like this kind of car, and any particular color, or like, should it have like a, you know, a sports version or anything? Like, no, just based on this kind of car. And then you look at the rest of the film, and you kind of use your own judgment to start figuring out what you think will be good or not.
Yeah.
I mean, it just takes time. It's quite annoying when you start a film if it's a new CG supervisor. You just spent a year of your life building up all that trust, and then you start the new film and it's gone, and you restart again. But and it's pretty easy to do it again. It's just do the work you need and add a couple of extras in it then just to show a wee bit your creative flair. And and it's quite often like if we're working on something background or something hidden, or if you're working on, I don't know, something that's got like a lot of hidden text on it or something. It's a complete brown nose move, but I've seen people do it before, and I've done it before as well. It works quite well. If there's like text or something that you put maybe like the CG supervisor's name as like part of the text, maybe something like a side of a gun or like a description of blah 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 gun, something caliber, put their name in it or something, and it's like, oh, it's funny, it's a laugh.
The personal touch, add a bit of flair.
Yeah, something stupid like that.
Yeah.
And I was working on Dr. Dolittle. I was making this giant kind of dockyard thing, and it was like a really really long environment, so it was very hard to get into one shot because it was so long, like the detail got destroyed. So I started adding this giant, like I got just this yellow rubber duck, and I scaled it up to like this massive size. So I think it was like one of my submissions, I put like rubber duck beside Eiffel Tower as like a scale comparison. And then in all my other renders, like I had this rubber duck in, so you had this idea to scale. Just it's silly wee things that they don't destroy or take away from the work. They don't get in the way, but just something to add like a wee giggle or like a you're going to be sitting in a room trying to convince somebody to like your work who spent the last 4 hours doing nothing but meetings and speaking. Like, they're pretty knackered and they're done. If you can just give them a wee smile, it'll go a long way.
Definitely does. Wow, right, okay, I didn't expect that. Yeah, because you said so many great points there. So first of all, like the one you just finished off, it's like everyone kind of, I know it's so easy to kind of just be in the habit of doing the same thing and kind of giving the generic answer or just following the motions and stuff, but sometimes just doing, getting out of your comfort zone or doing something that just shows that you care and you appreciate the work that you're doing, and it goes such a long way. But you mentioned something really interesting. So obviously having the ideas and having like a different variation, super important. Do you think when it comes to working on the job, I know it depends maybe on film or game, etc., but it's better to kind of give yourself a deadline a lot earlier than what you would normally do, so just so it gives you that extra breathing space just in case you actually have to edit it, and don't actually complete it to 100% or what you consider 100%, complete it to like 70% just in case?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to the way it's kind of, it's a good way to describe it. Like when we're given stuff, like we're given a task, so we have like Shotgun or something. It's like a tracking software for your work, and it'll say, "Here's your task. You've got 2 days to do it." And a lot of the time, it's completely unrealistic, and there's no way in hell you can do that in 2 days' time. But that's just essentially what they've bid to the client. So like they have to say to the client, "We can do this in 2 days for this much money," so like they can get the money for that. But then if it takes longer than that, well, it needs to take longer than that. That's the kind of way we work. Is it doesn't matter how much the time is. Like if it needs to be done, you need to do it. Like we can get more money or we can shuffle something around. But that's a big bit that's built into it, is that 2-day task to complete it. That's just for the first pass. It's probably going to be that a month down the line, that's going to come back to you when they've relit the shots or they've changed an animation. It's going to be edited and changed. So I think that's like definitely set yourself like kind of an unrealistic timeline. Like if you think it's going to take you a week to make something, set yourself a limit of 5 days, because that's closer to how it would work. You'd make it in 5 days. You might not get it perfect and finished, but it's going to come back to you later on at some point. And if it doesn't need to come back later on, if they're going to hide it, if it's going to be blurred in the background, fine. You've saved yourself 2 days of your life that you didn't need to waste. That's pretty much essentially the way of thinking about it. Is like you got to convert. Stop thinking about it as like just working and stuff. Like you're also spending your life on something,
of course,
and that's much more valuable than anything else. I think. Like if you spend 2 days of your life making something that's in its reality, you're never going to see in a film because in the background and blurred. It's good, you feel good because you're like, I made a really cool thing and I know it's in there. Nobody else is ever going to know it's in there. And like it's kind of a morbid experiment of like a mind experiment. But like if you think about look at something you're making and think about in like if you look at like a Picasso or something like that, think about in 50 years time, long after you're dead, when people are going to look back at your work, are they going to give two hoots about that amazing screw that you hid in the back of a door because
Yeah.
you wanted to show off how good you could do it? It's pointless. It's like that's 2 days more of life that you could have for something else, for something that nobody's ever going to know or appreciate. And as soon as you no longer know it, it's gone.
So, because obviously that tears back to the main point that you said right at the start is decision making. Did that take you a long time to learn?
Oh yeah, that's what I said at the start when I like going mad and trying to impress. I did that all the time, and your work suffers for it because you end up being absolutely knackered at the end,
Mm-hmm.
and the stuff you produce is much lower quality, and you waste so much time. Um, yeah, I think that's like everyone kind of has that issue with it because you don't know where to be efficient when you don't know how to be efficient.
Of
Essentially, I
course,
don't know
yeah.
if that
No,
makes sense
no,
in the
no,
sentence.
no. Great point.
Like, yeah, it just takes time to learn, and I think as well as per studio, you'll figure out what they're comfy with and what they're not comfy with, and it also goes back to like the CG supervisor. Like some of them will be happy, or maybe not happy, but more, more kind of happy to make adjustments and be like, okay, I know this thing's not perfect, but it's going to be half hidden behind a bush, so it doesn't really matter. Whereas some CG supervisors want everything, no matter what it is, to be 100% perfect, even if it's going to be hidden.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of depends on who you're getting there and who's not. But again, if you can just, it's just learning where you need to put the detail. Because I think when I started a frame story, that was a big one. Like I'd get a task and I would just dive into it. But then if I just took 15, 20 minutes to actually find the shot that was going to be in, see the previs and like, okay, so I'm only really going to see it from this angle. I know I need to make all of it, but I'm going to give like 80% of my effort to this one angle and 20% to the rest of it. And if they need more, I'll do more afterwards. But
yeah,
that took me a while to learn because I would just jump on it head first blindly and then suffer the consequence later because it's more fun. You don't want to spend time researching and going through stuff and planning because essentially it's really boring and dull. If you're an artist, you want to jump in and create. You don't want to sit with a pen and paper and figure out timings. But you need to do it.
yeah. Like I don't think a lot of people, and I know it's hard when the adrenaline's growing and you're trying to obviously, like, I understand that you have probation periods and you're trying to kind of make sure that you're whether it's 3 months, 4 months, depending. It's normally 3 months, give or take. It might be different depending on the studio size or like the way they do things, but usually it's 3 months. And I understand you obviously want to impress people within that time frame, but the best decisions you can make is when you actually. It's so obvious. It's what you said there. It's like taking a breather and actually just thinking, right, what do I have to do, and approaching it as simple as possible. We naturally overcomplicate things, like you said. It's the same with portfolio. That's why I said about the thing about just choose something boring, because it's going to be relatable to the actual job at hand. You're not going to get given the coolest robot to design for hard surface. It'd be great to do it, but that'll be going to a more advanced modeler. And there's so many questions that you can just wipe off the list and just take away all the stress. Like, you just have a basic plan going of what you need to get done today and just stick to it. And most importantly, ask questions. I say it every time, reach out to people and figure things out. But one of the things I also wanted to ask about modeling is, when it comes to being able to interpret like a rough sketch from the job, is there times when you're given something very loose and it's kind of hard to kind of figure out how to make it? Is that quite a common occurrence when you're on the job, or do you get fleshed out work all the time?
No, a lot of the time there's a lot of imagination involved. That essentially is the kind of work that'll go to the people, like I was saying at the start there. When you start showing, you've kind of got a wee eye for how to add extra stuff in. Like that kind of work will go to those kind of folks because like I don't have it here. But it was in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I wasn't working on it myself, but a friend of mine was the lead on it. And they were doing that. I can never remember the name of it, and it sounds like a word that I don't think is particularly pleasant. So I'm not even going to try it just in case I mess it up.
That's all right.
But I think it's like the start of it. There's kind of like a big tentacled octopus monster that they're all fighting on top of a massive platform.
They're all dancing around with a little Groot.
Yeah. I can maybe send you it later on. It's on a talk somewhere. But that was a really, really rough sketch, literally on like a paper napkin from the director, and that was the reference.
What? Right, okay.
It was just like a 5-minute squiggle in the back of it, and then I think it was like a photo of the inside of a goose's mouth, and there was like a photo of a mole rat. It's just a really ugly animal. I think it's blind thing with no eyes, lives under the ground with no hair.
Interesting.
It's that was pretty much it. It's like, okay, now make me like a 3-minute opening sequence with a monster based on that. You're like,
Here we go. You've got a certain amount of time to do it. You've got a week far away.
yeah, and it's essentially like you work for your CG soup is the one you want to aim to please, because like the films picked the studio based on the work they've done, so they know what kind of stuff they can do, and then your CG supervisor will pick people to do the work based on what he knows they can do. So you like that's the one you've got to impress essentially.
Yeah.
It does have a kind of a negative one of sometimes you get like they can kind of make or break a film for the people working on it, because like in an odd sense they're kind of like they're for all intents and purposes they're kind of like your god, like this is the one you have to appease, and if they're not appeased, vengeance shall come at you. like maybe you're thinking about the film, but like the person you've got to deal with is them essentially. So if you get like a really good one, it's fine. If you get a bad one, it can make it a misery, and it's that negative thing is there's really nothing you can do about it, because they are, and like, until you become one yourself or go above it, like they are the highest ranking one.
Yeah, so you have to obey.
Yeah, so you'll learn with each one. Like it's normally like when you start on a new film, somebody else will have worked with him before, and they'll give you like a wee quick 5-minute heads up. Like, by the way, he doesn't like this. Make sure you do this kind of thing, and you're like, cool, and that covers it. And then from day one, you can just make a quick good impression. Like there's one of our old CG soups. Like if you reviewed work, or if you put work in, he wouldn't even look at it unless you had reference. Like if you spent days making it and you didn't have reference images, he would just skip it, wouldn't even look at it. It didn't matter what it was.
Right.
That was just his thing. No reference. I don't look at it. And like, it's just learning those little quirks. Like they're so dependent on an individual person that it's one of those things you just can't really figure out. But I think it's just important to understand that you need to impress that dude. That's your go-to.
Well, like it's such an important point, because at the end of the day, it's about, because you're working for a studio, you're working for a company, and I know this sometimes takes a while to figure out for lots of people, but like everyone's always looking for this kind of dream job, or what's like the thing they want to do, whether it's in film, whether it's in game, and being surrounded by people on a daily basis. Like if you're going to see them a lot, you want to be good friends with them. It's the same like with just like producers, etc. You want to be best friends with them, or at least figure them out and talk to them as much as you can. Yes, there's a lot of conflict in the job, etc. There's lots of yes and no's, and you have to learn that. Like you have to learn to compromise. It's not easy for me to say this, but it's just part of the way. Like they have to keep the engine rolling. Like at the end of the day, it's all about getting a film out there. It goes back to the main point that we everyone says all the time. It's like, yes, you want to spend hours on this, maybe this one, I don't know, fancy hero asset, etc. But it's like Ruairidh said, if you're not going to see it, it's like the producers just want it done and completing off the list, etc., and move on to the next thing. And on this topic of, I guess, being smart and being efficient, obviously we've got lots of outsourcing going on in the industry and stuff. But when it comes to being a modeler, how could a modeler be more resourceful? Like when it comes to making assets, I know obviously we have asset libraries and stuff that we tend to save, but what kind of helps you speed up your production process? Or is it just mainly experience?
If you were a film studio, it's different because it's dependent on the work you've done and the project you're given. It's not really something you can do much about until you get into a studio.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you're going to do like freelance stuff, or maybe like in a smaller studio, like the easiest way is, before you spend your day making something, if you've got some ideas, like, I don't know, make like a really basic shape, or download like a stock model, and just like to go into Photoshop and like paste some images on top of it of like, I might put this here, I was thinking about this thing over here. It'll take you 20 minutes, half an hour to do. Show that to whoever it is that needs to make the decision about it. And then you've automatically saved yourself potentially a bucket load of time before you've gone in and made a bunch of stuff. They can just really quickly go like, no, not interested. Yeah, I like that idea. Like, I think that's your quickest way to do it. Outside of that, then it is your asset library stuff. It kind of varies from studio to studio, but some studios will buy stuff like from Turbo Squid or things like that.
Yeah, I remember you said that on the when we were doing the live stream. That was very interesting. Okay,
but that's but it's okay. I've got to be careful because I've not looked at every single model in Turbo Squid, all thousands of them. But as a general rule for the stuff that we've bought, it tends to end up being slower going that way.
Okay,
because like somebody have made something that they're happy with making, but we've got to make it work for our pipeline, and it takes me just as long, if not longer, to go in and correct and change and edit that model to make it work for us before I can even start my normal work on it.
Yep.
I think it's just, as long as you get your idea to start with, like, I think that's the idea of like the bigger studios. That's their same way. Is like they'll just download a model from TurboSquid. That's their equivalent of just doing a quick Photoshop mockup. Because for them, the money is not quite as important. It makes no difference to them spending 40 quid on a model. It is, if I'm an employer or something, I'm not going to be spending 40 quid just for the concept idea to show to my boss that might get approved. I'm only going to spend money if I know it's going to be worth it.
Yeah.
Like, I think, just do that in Photoshop. Do a quick 15, 20-minute mock-up. And what I'll do, like, in studios I worked in before, is like you send that over to them, and then they would do like a quick paint over on top, like a wee red circle, change this or something, and then you could just keep that open as reference, and it keeps you on track. Like when you start to bring in all your own ideas, you can just look across at that and be like, does that stick to like that wee bit of text in the circle? Does this image match up with what that says? Like if it says, keep everything hard edged, or keep everything looking like a shark or something, you can look at your idea and like, does that match? If it doesn't, probably not a good idea to pursue. Like, just set yourself rules from the start.
Yeah.
Kind of not like strict rules, but kind of just broad things. If you look at like cars are always a good example. Every car manufacturer kind of has their own style of front grille. Like BMW have always got that double kidney grille and stuff. Like, if you're going to go to your boss and be like, I've got this new idea for a grille, they're like, well, no, all our cars have this same one. Why are you wasting your time doing this? It's kind of just certainly some basic construction rules in place you need to stick to, and it will speed you up a lot because you won't do time on the wrong stuff.
Yeah. Thanks for answering it. So, speaking of the modelling side of things, so what would you say, because Taylor's off, so thank you for bringing the topic up that you just said there, because when it comes to the modelling aspect, is there any kind of common modelling mistakes that you see a lot of people making when it comes to beginners? Is there anything that can just... Booleans. All right, yes. Oh, awesome. Here we go. Right, the world of Booleans. The conversation begins. Where do we start, man?
I think it's a poor planning.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a hard one to learn. You get it as you're going, but like, if you're, what would be like a good example? Like if I'm making a let's say a cylindrical object that I know at some point in time I need to put a hole in the side of it to put, say, a screw or a bolt into or something. If I spend 4 months of my life or whatever making this amazing prop built around this central cylinder, and I've only given it 12 edges, because when it's smooth it looks fine and it's lovely and it doesn't matter. And then when I need to go back on later on and add in that hole, 12 edges is not enough to give me like the ability to put a hole in the side of it while keeping it cylindrical without distortion. And then all that work I've built on top of that cylinder could potentially be a complete waste of time, because I need to go back in and redo that cylinder. And like, it's just, when you're making stuff, like, think ahead. Like I know a lot of people, when they're starting something, they'll try and put as minimum detail in as possible. It's like, if I'm starting anything cylindrical, I'll always go with like maybe like a 48-sided cylinder, something completely overkill, just so I've got the option. And at the end, I can go in and take out all the detail I don't need. Or once I get to a point when I know it's good, it's got everything in it needs, I can strip out detail. But it's so much easier to do that than to go back in later on. And like, if you've ever built something kind of like spherical, to try and rebuild a sphere after you've done work to it is a huge pain in the bum. Because if I've perfectly put like a circle or something into it, if I try and make that spherical again, my circle will get distorted, or any work I put onto it will be distorted. It's like, if you just start with a good base, it works with booleans. But you can use booleans fine if you want, but I find people use them in place of detail, because you can just quickly smash in stuff. You can quickly lay something out, do some booleans, holes here. It looks really, really cool, but then when it comes back to actually tidying that up, you've given yourself a bit of a nightmare, because you've got to try and fix that, add detail in that was never there, and keep the shape, and it just
it's just a nightmare. Because you said quite a few things there that raised a lot of different questions. So when it comes to when I was studying, so it's been 4 years now since university, and I was always kind of told efficiency, efficiency, as low as poly as possible. And I feel that this has always been a hindrance to a lot of people's work. I feel that people try to get so clean that they almost get, how can I say it, like it becomes an obsession. Like they're trying to make this super low poly or whatever, and they're going to certain extremes that is taking away the detail. And a lot of the cases I've come across, I'm just like I'm telling people now, just add more. Like, don't be afraid to add.
Yep.
Like, it's better to start adding more rather than taking away, because at the end of the day, you're wanting the best result. Yes, depending on I don't know, if it's for mobile, then okay, I understand. But if it's like something that's for film or etc., like
you go backwards afterwards. I don't know. It's a theory of mine, and this is very much like a shower thoughts kind of theory.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're getting taught by somebody at university, say like, it's one that I've been toying with the idea of going and doing some teaching, but one that's really put me off of that is essentially not as a strict rule, but the point that I decide to leave film and become a teacher is the point which I will no longer be up to date with anything that develops.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe that's the deal with, like, at the moment, like when we're studying efficiency and all those kind of things, the person who's teaching you that, maybe they learned how to do all this stuff 15, 20 years ago when the computers they were working on were only capable of super efficient low polygon models. But as they're teaching people 15 years later, who the computer you've got in your bedroom can smash out stuff theirs could never dream of.
Yeah.
And that's a worry I have now. Like, if I stop now, like, I think I'm at a point when I'm pretty good at what I do. But then in 15, 20 years' time, things will have moved on so far. I'll be doing something like this. I'll be teaching somebody, 48-sided cylinder. And like, what? You on about? Like, no, we don't do that anymore. But like, I'm so determined to do it because that's the way I learned.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like a wee quick picture there. It's kind of a daft one, but it's one that I kind of like looking at. It's like a series of sketches. It's Picasso ones when he was trying to break things down to their most basic shape, or how can you represent something with a minimum detail. And it was in all of them, you have to start with the high res one, or like the nicely detailed one, and then you work backwards from it. Yes, you can take detail, but that's the thing, is that you start with the full image and then you take away until you get to the point when it's no longer recognizable, and you take one step back. It's kind of harder to start with kind of amorphous blob and try and make it look like something. You know, take the thing and then see how low you can take it before it no longer holds its shape.
That's a great. I was just pausing. Yeah, that's a great image. I'll include that. I'll include that in the podcast, man, because that's really helpful. Because I don't know, it's just I hear it all the time still, and it's something that's kind of, I don't know, like it took away a lot of my creative freedom and wanting to actually just model. Like, I understand that it's like you said, it's kind of, it's behind its time. Like, we've got technology these days that are just, there's so much more creative freedom in that sense. Like, there's not much limitation. But yes, there's lots of other ways to add detail, like decals, etc. You name it, whatever it may be. But when it comes to modeling, that is a great image to kind of showcase and actually base it around. So I'll show that to everyone on the screen listening in, because it does really help a lot. So when it comes to modeling, when it comes to terms, this is something I've never kind of thought of asking. So I was like, right, I better ask Ruairidh. What would you say is like common modeling terms, or like kind of language that people should know?
Ooh.
Is there any kind of words that, when it comes to you starting the industry, and like they've said maybe a phrase or something that you're just like, what's that mean? I've never heard of that. I've never asked this on the podcast. I'm intrigued to see if you say what you say.
I mean, there's certainly been like on specific films. Like when I was working on Monster High, and we were working on that, it became like, it was kind of like it started as a comment, and then it became like a running joke of like, you need to monsterfy or spookify that more, or like wonkify it. You know, everything's too straight. You need to wonkify it up a bit. Like, you'll kind of get stuff like that, but they're kind of film specific. There's not really any I can think of specific modeling terms.
No technical terms that kind of stand out to you, or common techniques that should. What about techniques? Is there any kind of modeling? Maybe
like point order. That took me a while to figure out. That was when I first heard that, I'd never heard that in my life before.
Are you able to elaborate what that is?
Yeah, so like a vertex order or a point order. So like each you've got a square with 4 vertices, one in each corner. Each one has a number, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then if I go into, say, ZBrush, work on it and bring it back, it might be 1, 3, 2, 4. Like those numbers have moved around. For some reason, those vertexes have changed what their number was. They've got a different value.
Okay.
So then when, say, if I try to take a morph map, but I try to do something, which is I've updated this one, I need to apply it to this one. It will use the vertex order and it'll go, okay, so I'll match 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3. So you need them to be the same number layout. That's more for like faces. Like if you've got like a base face, then you go into ZBrush and sculpt it and do all the changes you need to do, and then you project it back onto the original face. It needs to have the polygons in the same order. But there's I think it's in Maya, they've added it in, it's under like mesh edit, transfer vertex order or something, and you select 3 in a row, and then it'll transfer that number back. That one I'd never heard of beforehand, because it's just something that I'd never had to worry about before.
Of course.
When you're on ZBrush work, you just jump back and forward and you add it final 15, complete number 10, done, _1, and you put all your maps out and everything. Like, you can name it and do it as many times as you want, because you don't have to worry about keeping everything consistent. It work, if I make an edit and I upload it, that could then destroy rigging and animation and all their work. So you need to make sure everything's got the same kind of vert layout, which is a bit of a dull one, but it's got to be done.
Yeah. When it comes to naming conventions, it's the amount of stories that I've heard of people having their interesting naming conventions or things just destroying everything, and you're just like, what have they done? And I'm just like, I'm sorry. All the apologies.
And a lot of the bigger studios, they've got we had like a sanity checker, which we had like a couple of tools for naming stuff, and then it would do a test, or like it would go through your model before it was even uploaded, before like it left your computer and went onto the farm. It would go through and flag any errors, so you couldn't physically put anything onto the farm unless your naming conventions were correct. And I think I was probably just born out of frustration of something similar to that. People just uploading anything and then hoping it worked. They're like, no, I got the naming right, and then it missed out a letter or a dot or something. No, we're just going to build a tool to take any option out of it. Like, just don't do it correct. You don't no work.
Yeah. Oh, dude. Like, as long as that's everywhere, I'm happy. Like, the more efficient, the better. Like, there's nothing worse than when you're trying to navigate, trying to figure out where the file is, and you can't find it, and then you realize it's just like one thing that's literally destroyed everything. But I guess that's the best way. You'll never forget that. Once you've made that mistake, you'll never forget it. I've made my fair few of mistakes. I've made countless mistakes. I've learned a lot from it. So, right, the next one. So today is a jam-packed one. So everyone, prepare yourself. We're just warming up. I think we're only halfway through, man. So I appreciate the time. So when it comes to the industry, so when people are getting into any role, once again, this is another kind of question. It does depend once again, but can you shift roles in the industry, and how should people go about it, and like how should they approach it? Is there anything that you've learned certain people do to kind of make the transition more smoother?
I think that's more based on what you do in your free time. Because at the moment it's a bit of a sore point at the moment, but like a lot of modelers have been made redundant or got rid of, just because we're kind of like the first people to hit a film. Like, we get the film in, we're pretty much the first people to start working on it, and then it'll go to all the other departments. So at the moment nothing's been filmed, so we're not getting any work, so they don't pay us, so we all got to get rid of. But there's a bunch of modelers who had maybe like Houdini skills or those kind of other skills. Like, they weren't proficient in them, but they had a good enough idea that they can then go to, say, like CFX or go to rigging or something, because they've got some of that knowledge. And it's essentially, that's kind of your main way to go about it, is you would just show some interest, maybe speak to your head of department, like, I think about doing like a wee secondment. I want to go to rigging for a year or something. And they'll go like, the way I told you is a good idea. Have you got any idea about it? Why do you want to do it? And you just sell it. I think it's essentially the best thing. Like, most of the time you're doing it for completely your own interest, because you want to give it a bash, but don't tell your boss that you want to do it because you want to give it a bash. Give them a reason that makes sense. Like, I wanted to go do rigging so that when I come back, I can make models which will work for rigging, because at the moment I keep having pushback. Like, I keep making characters, and Riggin always hates the way I make knees or something like that. Like, I want to go work with them for half a year, so that I come back, I can just get rid of all those problems. In reality, you're just doing it because you want to give it a shot because you think it'll be fun. But sell it to your bosses like, this will help the company, and they go, oh, I totally, yeah, I'll buy that.
No, I agree. I understand. I know where you're coming from.
And I think it's good as well if you're strategic about it. Do it near the end of a film, because we get hired.
Yes, I agree. Okay.
We get hired per film, so maybe if you've said a month before the film ends, I've got quite a wee bit of interest in rigging. They may like as they start to hire riggers, because they hire them in stages. You don't hire everybody for a film at the same time. You hire all the modelers, and then they'll bring in riggers and animators as they need them. They said maybe at the end of the film, if you're thinking I might not get a contract extension, be like, I'm quite into rigging, And they're like, oh, cool, yeah, we'll keep you on because we already like you, so maybe we'll put you into rigging for a bit. Like, be strategic with your timing.
Yeah,
don't be like day 2 of the film. Like, I don't want to be a modeler. You're 2 days in the film. And
you just got a job as a modeler, and then you're instantly just like, nah, I'm switching over. Can we go over to rigging, please? Gosh, that's what you call either the most insane confidence in the world, or you're just insane.
I've done some kahunas for that.
Yeah. But imagine you did that and you actually backed it up. That'd talk about pulling off something insane. That'd be interesting to watch. That'd be a drama show right in front of you.
So that'd be a meme for sure. The sunglasses and the cigarettes.
Yeah. Brilliant. Because the reason why I wanted to ask you this question was I have so many friends who are trying to make a transition at the moment in their studio. Like they're wanting to move over to something different, and I think a lot of people approach it wrong. Like you said, something they're super important. So when it comes near to the end of the film, once again, making sure that you finish the task that you've done. So whatever you're working on right now, I would probably make sure you finish that first before you kind of give anything, because you don't want to have to kind of slow anything down in the production. Like you just want to make it as easy as a transition as possible. Like you were saying, not lower people in, but slowly build up the discussions as you go along, and it'll just make things more possible. I would say though, would you say someone trying to do that early on in their career is a bad idea? As in, if it was like they're only there for a year, would that still be possible?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking earlier on about how to get across that idea of you've got your own creative mind that's in the last 2 frames or whatever, chucking your own ideas. If you want to be a rigger, why not in that last bit of the frame do a really simple rig in the model that you've made and be like, I know this is how it moves and interacts. Like that could be really useful for showing a client, like you've made a super intricate gun or something, or like a super intricate, I don't know, like a door that opens in a very specific way. You're selling them the image of it. But if you want to be like a rigger or an animator, why not make a wee submission of like, this is how the door is going to work, this is how I envision it working. You can get that in from day 1. And then you're essentially doing the same thing. You're letting your boss know that, by the way, I have these other skills. I have an interest in this. This is what we got. Just we were all getting made redundant. They sent around an email like, does anybody have any skills that are useful for other departments that we could use, or like that we could put you into there so we don't lose you as an employer? Like, you can do that from day 1. If you're really good at something, as long as it doesn't eat into your time too much. If you've got a particular love for texture, there's nothing stopping you doing a quick texture, putting it at the end of your daily review, and then that's just essentially you've got. It's the way to think about it is you know everything about your own skills. The person hiring you knows what they've seen in your portfolio, and unless you show them or tell them what you're into, they're never going to know. If if you're got a love of texture, if you never tell anybody or show it, they're never going to just one day go turn around and go, oh, by the way, do you fancy being a texture artist? Because why would they? You've never shown any interest in it. It's never going to happen. Just think, it's not like forcing it in their face, but kind of take every opportunity you can to put it in there. That you've got a wee interest in it, or just bring it up in conversation. You can do that from day 1. You can do that in your interview, because that's different than just saying, like, I don't want to be a modeler, I want to be a texture artist. Like here, I'm going to come in and do modeling, but I also I do texture on the side. If it comes to it, maybe I could do some texturing with you guys. Just you can essentially just let people know what you're into.
Definitely. Like take the opportunities as well when you can. Like you never know, like something might come up, and like you said there, like give it a go, try it and see what happens. Because I think
treat it like a date.
Yeah.
Treat it like a first date. You've got to somehow, and like an hour's dinner convey to another human being that I'm a human being that you should spend time with. Same idea. You've got to convey to your boss, like, I'm a human being that it's worth you keeping on because I've got these other skills.
Yeah.
The same kind of stuff. You got to schmooze it. You don't go on a date and speak for an hour solid about all your skills and all the details. Like, you just give enough hints to kind of spark interest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, perfect answer. Because when it comes to working on a job, once again, conversation it's so important. Like getting to know your team early on. So when you start, you talk to everyone, learn a bit about everything, figure out who you're gonna be talking to the most, and sit with those people, learn for their experiences, and ask things. Many times in my when I was starting out in the past, like I've made. Yes, I always like to talk and chat and stuff, but there's been certain times where I've maybe not talked enough in a certain scenario to really help me get all the information that I needed to get answered, and that's therefore slowed things down or caused a problem in the pipeline, etc. And I've obviously had to learn from that and stuff, but that's just through experience and trial and error. But conversation and just talking to people, it makes so much things 10 times easier. And one thing though, because we're on this subject of conversation, once again, not saying like for example, if you don't know something, say it. Trust me. If you there's nothing worse than keep holding something back and saying, "Yeah, I know what I'm doing. Yes, I'm great." Like there was one situation a few years back when I was working on a project when somebody was telling me one thing and then the other person was telling me the other thing, and they both had like the same kind of level of kind of seniority, or you know what I mean, like rank, and because of that, it was like, well, whose process do I? Because I have to show the work to both of them, and I was like, right, instead of me constantly delaying, I just talked to them both, and I was like, right, I need to figure this out. Which one do I do? So I just messaged both of them, and then I had a chat with them and figured it around that, because I wasted so much time for that, trying to figure out like how to kind of merge the two together, and it doesn't work at all. Like you have to kind of it's all about communication.
I guess to keep in mind the scale of it as well, because you're saying you're talking to two people who are both giving you kind of conflicting ideas. They have no idea they're conflicting you because they're doing 50 million other things that they don't understand, that you're having a bit of a rough time. It's the same as like, if you want to be a texture artist, wherever, if you don't tell them, they'll never know.
Yeah.
Like they're never going to imagine, like just because you're stressed out about something, they've got 50 different things they're stressed about. So
do you
talk to them?
When it comes to just modeling as a whole, I understand, like, so one of the main things that gets anything working is obviously working as a team and offering your opinion. When it comes to juniors, what have you seen in the past? Do you think juniors kind of give their voice enough? Because at the end of the day, they've been hired because they're good at the work. They've shown that they can do the work. And do you think juniors, how can I say this? It's like, I'm not saying like deserve more chance to have like their right to say stuff, but like offer an opinion. Like, how important do you think that is? Do you think we need to see more people kind of listening to juniors? Like, am I asking that the right way? Do you know what I mean?
No, it's this is kind of what our dailies are for. So like you're in the office or email and stuff, that it could be kind of hit or miss whether you get something. But this is why we go to dailies, because this is where you have an idea and you sit down with the rest of the team, and it's not just your team, it's rigging, animation, whoever tends to be in the dailies is a group of people you're going to be directly working with, and that's kind of your opportunity to sell your idea. So like, you've been given a brief, and you're going to, like, you put up on the screen and you go, this is why I made it. I think this is the big one where juniors fail, is they're scared. I think it comes across in their mind if they're scared to argue, but
yes.
It's not.
Okay.
It's not. You're not arguing. You're explaining to somebody your thought process, because they've got something in mind, and you've got to tell them. It's not going up to them going, your thoughts are rubbish, I'm doing it this way. That's not the way you go about it. It's like, okay, I heard what you said, but I've also looked at the rest of the film, and I saw this thing, and I think, if I do it this way, it'll really fit into the scene. And then, like, this is why. I think that's where juniors have their main failing, because they're so scared to speak, because they'll see a boss and they go, I can't give the boss an opinion. It's like, it's not an opinion. That's the whole point of dailies. It's like you're all sitting in a circle and just chatting it out. And like, they want to hear your ideas, because if they're spent all day in meetings, it kind of sucks the creativity out of you sitting in meetings all day long. So, if you've got somebody like normally juniors, because they're more fresh faced and have yet to be crushed by the reality of the industry, they'll always have like much more enthusiasm, and like, it's really, really annoying. Like if I'm sitting next to a junior and I can see how enthusiastic they are, and they'll work through their lunch and work late at night, and you see them smashing out all this work, and you're like, yes, they're going for it. And then you go to dailies, their work goes up, and they sit in silence, and then the CG soup will just like, I'll discredit all their work and tell them, no, it should be this, and they just sit there and take notes and go, yes, 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 yes. Like, dude, you were here till like 9 o'clock last night smashing this out because you had this picture. Like, tell them about the picture, tell them why you did it. Like, you're not arguing, just explain to them your thought process. Because that's most of the time what we end up doing is just you're trying to convince somebody that what you've made is the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's just juniors just need to do that. Just don't argue, because at the end of the day, if the CG soup says no, it's no, regardless. But like, you've got to try and like look at your project and think about somebody looking at it who has no idea. Like, if you put like a piece up in ArtStation and you've got that bit at the side where you write the description, and that's you put in, you go, oh, I saw this thing and I decided it would be cool if I did this and this and this. You can do it in ArtStation. Do that in a daily. It's exactly the same thing. Explain your process, why you did it, what the idea was, and your life will be so much easier. And it makes it, you're asking before about giving that opportunity to make things about yourself or be creative. It'll happen so much quicker, because if you're going in from day one and you're saying, like, I did it this way, this way, this way, and this is why, you're starting that process rather than spending 2 or 3 months waiting until you feel you've got enough confidence to speak up in a dailies meeting. It's like, the whole point of dailies is to speak. Just go for it from day one, and just it's as you're saying, like, if the company's hired you, even if you're as a junior, they've hired you because they can see some potential, or they can see that you're good at your job. You're not there to prove to them you're good at that particular job. You want to prove to them you're good to be employable.
Yep.
And sitting quietly in a corner and just putting nothing in is not showing them that.
Definitely. Because one of the things, so I was actually going to do a whole podcast around, so I was going to do this podcast, right, based around the topic of yes and no. So, like, a lot of people, you're just like, you're like, what's he gonna say? It's, is this a difficult topic about to be raised? No, like, when it comes to knowing when to say yes and knowing when to say no, yes, it's how you say it, but it's like, I completely agree with everything you say. Like, at a day, if you have something that you want to offer, then offer it. Like, don't shy away from it. I think one of the things, though, I will say is, so me when I'm working, I get very, like you said, very energetic, very carried away. So if I was sitting beside you, Ruairidh, at work, I don't know if you'd survive it. You'd be like, gosh, this guy doesn't shut up. This non-stop talking.
That's why I have noise cancelling headphones.
Yeah,
them for a reason.
The noisy Scottish people. That's perfect. But it's just the one thing I was going to say, though, is there's knowing when to ask a question and then asking too many questions. As in, there's one thing that you can learn from. So on the podcast, I've always said questions is the most important thing. However, there's one thing that I fell into the trap on. I always like to relate back to my experience. It's always the best one. Is sometimes you jump to the question too quick, as in before actually thinking about the actual task at hand. So when you're on the job and you've been asked to do something, don't necessarily jump straight to maybe Google or straight to the person sitting next to you. Actually give it some time to process and actually think about the job, so it actually carries through into future projects. It's easy when you don't know something, especially like, I always crave knowledge, and I'm sure we all do. Everyone wants to learn. They want to learn fast. I get it. But to actually learn, the best way is to actually give it the time to actually think before just going, right, how do you do this? How do you do that? How do you do this? Throw a question, obviously, when you need to. There's no harm in asking questions. Like, use your team around you as much as you can. At the day, they want to see what Ruairidh was saying about the enthusiasm. They want to see that you care about the work that you're doing. Because if you don't showcase that, they're going to be kind of second guessing or wondering, wait, he's not speaking as much. Why is he not doing that? It's showing messages or signs that you don't necessarily want to be showing, if you know what I mean. So just to kind of summarize that end of that topic, I think it is super important. So once again, be confident.
Wait.
On you go.
When you said in there as well, It's like I really enjoy having like mentees. I love helping teach people up because that's how I break the monotony of it. Because like essentially, I'm making the same thing day in day out. It's some people are dig that kind of life. It doesn't really tickle me as much, so I like to do like the teaching and stuff just to break up the monotony. I love having mentees. I love having people ask me questions because it gives me a chance to leave my desk for 5 minutes and go chat nonsense with somebody.
Yeah.
And I will answer every question that's given to me, but I get like it really gets on my nerves, and it gets on everybody around you's nerves. Is if you don't, like as you say, you don't take a wee bit of initiative. Like if you've got a problem, don't immediately just go run into somebody. How do I do it? Like, if somebody constantly comes up to me and keeps asking, like, oh, how do I do this? Like, well, you know how to do this. So, like, have you looked on, like if I have a problem with, say, Maya or something, look at the documentation, look at the help things, look at the FAQs. If somebody already asked it, check there. If somebody just keeps coming blindly asking me questions, like, are you even trying here?
Mm-hmm.
It's really annoying. But if you come up to me, like, I've spent 5-10 minutes, I've looked in the FAQs, I've had a look here, I've thought about this, I just can't figure it out. Like, cool, no worries, I'll come and help you. Because then it's like, I don't mind that at all. I'll help you as many times as you want. If you can't figure it out, you can't figure it out. There's no point killing yourself over something you can't do, spending all your time wasting it. But if you're not even putting that 5-10 minutes of effort in, that's when it'll become problematic. I guess it's that balance you got to find. Is putting 5-10 minutes with yourself, and then don't spend half an hour wasting your time figuring it out. But just put a wee bit in, just to at least try and figure it out, because you'll learn much more. Because a lot of the time, I've asked somebody for help, or somebody's asked me for help. If I'm in a rush, I'll just go across their desk and do the thing, and then go back to my desk. It's done. It's out the way. Get on with it. I have no idea what they've just done. But they've just come across and smashed some keyboard shortcuts, and they're like, oh, all right. It's like problem solved, but I'll move on. And then next time it comes up, you don't know what to be done.
Yeah,
that's like kind of that nice bit. Figure it out yourself. You might figure out the methodology behind it. So when you see it happen, you can be like, okay, I know why this happened and this happens, and then next time you don't have the problem.
I think it's all about being like realizing you have to be independent as well.
Oh, yeah.
And that was one of the subjects I was talking about with Jeremy, an animator on the podcast, is if you're a student and you're listening right now, one of the most important things you can ever learn, especially in like kind of focusing it as a priority in your later years of university, is realizing that you're growing up, that once you finish uni, you're going to have to be set on your way of kind of obviously getting everything done, like getting your own house, etc., learning how to look after yourself, all these different things. And this all ties into your job, like being independent, knowing how to approach tasks and figure things out before jumping the gun, like we're discussing. Because this is a topic I don't think's... I'm not necessarily saying that universities have to teach it, because unis already have a lot on their plate that they're trying to catch up with, and I understand that. I've always acknowledged both sides, and I appreciate both sides of the argument. But I do think it's easy for a lot of people to kind of just try and just ask before actually thinking. Right.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot of different things today about modelling. We've talked about so many different things, but there was two main reasons that I wanted Ruairidh to come on the podcast. One obviously being modelling and that, but the other one was towns and cities. So talking about lifestyle and stuff, because we're both from the same city, and he's moved all the way. He's now right at the bottom of the world. Down, well, not the bottom of the world, bottom UK. What am I saying? Bottom of the world.
Close enough.
Yeah,
close enough.
he's down in London. So, what's it like living in London, and how's life changed in those years compared to what it's like living in a small city back home?
It's a bit more stressful.
Just a bit.
My diet's drastically changed based on price, I must say.
All right. Perfect. At least you're thinking.
It's. I think you can. I don't know. It's maybe like a weird correlation, but I think the size of city you choose to move. If you're not from one, if you choose to go somewhere, I think it's kind of based on ambition.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you come to London, if you make the choice, I'll use London because I'm here. Like choosing to come here on a whim that you might get a job in a studio, that's a pretty bold move. Like I would not have moved here unless I had a job. Like, there's no way I would have just moved here in the hope that I'll figure it out, because it costs so much money to live here.
Yeah.
Like I was toying with the idea because I've been looking at some work, potentially up in Edinburgh or maybe looking in Glasgow, just to because a change back to a nicer life. And I was looking at like since like the price of houses and stuff, like a house I could get in Edinburgh or Glasgow for the money that I'm paying for this kind of cupboard. It's like holy hell. And I mean, but it's you got to choose whether you want to make that kind of a sacrifice to improve your work quality. So like massive studios are not going to be in tiny villages in the middle of nowhere because it's no use to them. So it's never been an issue pretty much up until now with this, like all the lockdown stuff that's happening. It was always a bit of a fear because you've always got like a 3-month rolling contract or less. So you're every 3 months or 2 months, say, you've got that fear in the back of your mind, like I might not have a job next week. And it's constant stress because I was only bringing up the money for it because that becomes like can become like an overwhelming thing because you're constantly trying to look for work and you constantly don't know if you can afford to have a house. But if you don't stay in, say, if I want to keep working in high-end films, if I don't stay in London, I can't keep working in high-end films because they're just the studios aren't in smaller places. But then if I don't have work, I can't afford to live in the high-end town. It's just it's this constant stress of like, and it's mostly financially based. I really like the way things are going just now, like the working from home stuff. I really hope that stays because that's going to make it so much easier for people. Like a lot of the friends I've got live out in the countryside way, and they'll spend like 2 hours a day commuting into work just so when they go home at night or if they lose their job, they live somewhere where they don't have that worry. They can afford their rent. They're good for 2 or 3 months. They can find some work. There's like at the moment I'm finding here that now that I've been made redundant, I've essentially got like a ticking clock. It's like I have a date that if I don't find a job, like I'm just screwed because it's not just the price of paying for the rent, but you had to kind of make a choice. Like as soon as it happened, you had to immediately make the choice: do I move or do I stay here? And I chose the stay here option, which right now isn't feeling like a particularly great one because that choice is I have maybe like 2 or 3 months of money to survive. And then after that, I have nothing. That also includes like moving. So say it came to the end of 2 months, I've run out of money. I can't afford to move house. I can't afford to stay. It's like you're like, it's like a complete gamble.
You're just stuck.
Yeah. So I think if you're going to go to a big city, it's what kind of got me here was just it was the immediate draw of it. It happened. I think it was like a 2-week from I was living in Poland, and then like 2 weeks later, I was living in London. It was like a completely super quick turnaround. And I wouldn't really advise doing it that way if you don't have savings. I think that's if you're in a smaller place, look at what your rent's going to be and make sure you've got about 2 months of that saved up. Because when you go to a bigger place, like it's going to destroy you stress-wise. If you have a stressful day at work, then you're getting destroyed with rent and stuff. Like it's going to just melt your brain.
Yeah.
I think if you're going to go to a big city, just make sure you have 2 months saved up. Or if you can manage to do it, get a remote job. Like I would love to like go back to living in Glasgow. Maybe not Inverness. There's not enough clubs there for my liking. But like go back to Glasgow or something. I'd love to work in Glasgow again, even if I was living in Glasgow and working for a place in London. Just how much more productive it'd be, how much more creative it'd be, because I'm taking all this stuff in my mind that's going to distract me and just getting back to just being creative.
Yeah, like my family, they love Glasgow. They're obsessed. Glasgow is the only city in Scotland I've not lived in. I've lived in every other city, but I've not lived in Glasgow.
Yeah, sorted.
So I need to start making this transition a bit. You have to give it a go. The biggest debate though is which football team am I going to go? That'll be the challenge. Me being a football man, but then
I'm not going near that debate.
Yeah, well, we'll not go down that path. We'll keep safe from that path in the world of Glasgow. We love you people in Glasgow. We love Glaswegians. My sister's a Glaswegian. But
I think just kind of went a wee tangent there, but I think that's just your main one is if you want to work in really high end places, you're going to have to go to big cities.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty much kind of just the reality of it. If you want to be really good stuff, you're going to have to live somewhere. You're probably not going to do that much. I mean, some people thrive in cities, but I don't know yourself. Like going from Inverness to living in London, that's a bit of a mind bender.
Well, if I was to do it, so I've lived in Edinburgh, but when you think of Edinburgh compared to London, it's still nothing in terms of size. But it's still, I was central, so it was still busy. But because I've talked to you about this many times before, because I was saying to you, I was wanting to move to London in the past, giving you my reasons, etc. And maybe I would do the same as you. Like, at the day, it'd be career driven. It wouldn't be necessarily based off the home living. So I'd be in the same situation as you, and I understand that. But it's knowing what you're signing up for. I think, like, I'm really happy for everything that you've done, and it's great to see what you've been doing, and it's awesome to see. But it goes back to the main point Ruth said there. Like, you have to plan hard. Like, you have to know what you're signing up for. Like, yes, sometimes you get lucky. I was fortunate in one of the places in my past. Like, I've moved 14 times now, so I've learned a lot about traveling and moving all around. Like, I've literally every year I'm in a different place. So but that was based on my career, because I've been trying to figure out a lot of different things. But maybe that's not for you. You don't know. Like, is moving around something that you can handle? Can you? Are you okay with being away from family all this different times and stuff? Like, how far do you want to be away from your family? And are you okay with that? Like, there's lots of questions that you have to play, and it's not just about the job. And I think that's a lot of people get distracted about that, because I know I've certainly been distracted about it in the past, of just caring just about the job. But you have to do what's best for you. But when it comes to once again, the main point before we continue this conversation is financials. So being able to save, knowing what you're going to be having to save up for. So you're going to have to save up for transport. Like, you mentioned something that a lot of people forget. Like, if you're commuting like 2 hours, like, that's insane. And you're going to have to figure out how much that's going to cost. You're going to have to figure out how much food you're going to have to need on a weekly basis. You're going to need to know how much you maybe pay for the gym, etc. Know how to implement your hobbies. Don't just base it around just surviving. Like, actually try and implement some sort of enjoyment as best as you can. But thanks for diving into that, because I know it is a big question. But
that may go back to, like, what you were saying before about learning about, what you were saying, what can you do at uni or whatever to learn more about it. I think it's those the very transferable skills about planning stuff out. Like, kind of looking at the reality of something. If you've got a week's deadline and you've got this mad plan to make this huge space station, like, you can't do it. You don't have enough time in a week to focus on the thing that you need to do. And it's like, look at prices. Like, I very blindly moved to London. It was a very stupid. Well, no, it worked out kind of well.
Dude, you worked on my favorite film of all time. I want to work on it.
That was pure luck. That was, and I think that's just because I've got a kind of personality when I don't really get phased by nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, the grammar was incredible in that one. Like, I don't.
It's okay. It's great.
It's like I don't know. I got like a kind of perhaps a too relaxed personality, and so, like, the way I've done it kind of works for me, because I've put myself in a very risky situation. Which, even if it doesn't work out, it's like, well, at least we give it a bash. But, like, that doesn't work for everybody. I think I guess a really simple way to think about it, even if you're a student, is before you decide to go running off to make a big film, like, for like a rough idea. So, like, this place I'm in just now. It's a 5-bedroom share in London. So, like, the more bedrooms you have, the cheaper it gets, essentially. Yeah. This is still £780 a month just for the room.
Right.
And then you got to add £200-300 on top of that for transport.
Mm-hmm.
And then your food and whatever on top of that. So if you're going to move to, like, a big city prospectively to try and find a job, have you got, say, I don't know, £1,200 a month free saved money that you can just spend while you're looking for work? Like, you got to plan it out. Like, don't move somewhere hoping to get work. Move somewhere if you've got a job. And this is what the big companies will do. This, like, they give you a moving budget. It's normally never enough to actually cover it. It's like 150 quid normally, but they'll help towards your moving cost, because that's how most people do it. Once you get a bit higher ranking, is you move for the job. You don't move to the city because there are some companies there. You move specifically for that job, and it's one that is where you got to get. Like, you need to think about, like, if you're going to get a pet or something. If you're going to be moving around the world all the time, it is a pain in the butt to move a pet. Like, when I moved from Poland, it cost about 2 times as much to move my rabbit as it cost to move my entire life.
Yeah.
It's just something I didn't consider. I was like, oh, I have a rabbit, yay. And then I kind of forgot the kind of job I've got, and like, oh, okay, I kind of need to move around. And, like, if you've got a partner as well, they might need to move with you. It's like, it's all stuff you've got to consider, because it's not like a normal job doing VFX. Like, you don't just go to the same shop in a shopping center every day. You're not going to the same restaurant. you could be living in a completely different country in less than a week. You need to have a life structured around that, and that's where I think I don't like it as much living wise, because I can't really set up my home comforts. I can't go out and buy like a big fancy memory foam bed and a couch and everything, because I might have to move that in a couple of days' time. It's like you've got to, I don't know, it's kind of weird. You've got to kind of set an expectation of what you're comfortable doing, and then get work that matches that.
Because I'm so happy you said that, because literally all I ever move, right? Like I said, I've moved 14 times. I've got my desks and I've got my computers. That's all I'm bringing with me. That and my clothes. I remember early on in my first few attempts of moving, right? So I'd be like, yeah, let's take the guitar, and then I realized next time, no, I can't take the guitar now. So no more guitar. So I was like, okay, we're giving that up. It's a balancing act. You have to know what to sacrifice, like you said, and it's compromise. It's always compromise. So 2 more questions before we get to the fun section. So we've got a fun random section. This is the great thing about having you back on, because you never got the chance to do this the first time, because I changed the podcast up, man. So prepare yourself for a really bombardment of fun, random, funny questions. But you said about COVID, which is super important, and remote. So these are the last 2 things I want to kind of talk about, because I've never talked about them yet. You said the great thing, so you're enjoying it in terms of, well, we're not enjoying COVID, but in terms of like the the situation. I did start that part off right, did I? But
that's going to be a sound clip.
Yeah. But when it came to remote work, how's it going? Like how's the whole the transition? Some studios are not doing so well. Some places are doing great. How's life been on your side of things?
The first month was a living hell. It's like, it's so unmotivating, and it would be very different if it was normality of working from home, because you've got the option to go out and do stuff. This is what's kind of been a bummer here, is like I'm in my house working, and I don't have any other option. It's like I essentially wake up and like you become like a robot, and it's completely soul destroying. Like we've had like a few people I know if I guess ended up turning into some really severe kind of mental health problems around about it.
Okay.
Because we said before, like I'm like for Frame Story, for instance, we're working in a very high end studio in a very big city, and we're talking about you build your life around that. So like you're not like I'm stuck in a room where I don't have all my creature comforts. I don't have the bed that I want, because I've got to buy and plan things based on I'm not going to be in this space. Like essentially, I'll have a room laid out for I'm coming here to eat and sleep before I go back to work, which is fine when you're eating and sleeping and working and doing nothing but that. But then there's this negative side effect of it is now I have absolutely nothing comfortable in my room, and it's driving me up the wall.
Yeah.
But there's kind of like it's giving me like a nice wee hope of it, because a big one that all the big VFX houses, they've never been keen with people working from home because of data protection and everything. Like it's something we were constantly asking at Frames, was like, can we do like, I don't know, a 3-day week and 2 days at home? Like, no, it's impossible. We can't do it. We can't. Like, it wasn't like they didn't want to do it. It was always, there was no way the infrastructure would never work. COVID hit, and then 2 weeks later, everybody's working from home. Like, oh, so you can do it. It was just like a choice.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of hoping that the companies stick to it, because it's saving them a huge amount of money, because like, they're not having to pay for the same office space, heating, food, cleaners, all that kind of stuff. The money they're saving on it's mental, because just you're working from home. And I'd be really, really happy if it stuck to me even 50%, because then like that side of having to plan your life around the work, you could start getting back to a more normal reality. Because like some of friends that have ended up having some like really severe problems from this is because they've got nothing. Like they don't have the stuff in the room. They've moved their desk and their computer. They've left all their other stuff somewhere else, or they've got rid of it. If we were working 50% from home all the time, if this had kicked in, you'd have some creature comfort. You'd have some nice things at home. You wouldn't have those worries, and it would just be so much more chilled. I wouldn't be worried about, or just in general, you wouldn't be worried about having to have rent in an expensive city. It would be okay to commute in for 2-3 days a week and then go back out to the countryside to live. It would make life so much nicer and happier. But it's just that first initial month was just brutal.
Yeah. Absolute savage.
But I know it's kind of one of those weird ones. Like I hate to complain about it because then I'm fine. I had a job, I got a house, not got an illness or nothing. There's much worse situations in the world. But I think that's the weird one about it is it kind of isolates you and it makes you forget about the rest of the world around about you.
Yeah.
And that's why I would never want to work full time just from home for that exact reason. I like going to dailies. I like going to have that conversation and sit with the soups and have ideas. And you can't if you're having like a webcam chat with 30 people, it's very different. If you start saying something, somebody else starts saying something, you stop and you stutter, and then one person tries to start speaking, and then there's a delay, and you start speaking. Like you can never have that same kind of conversation. I think like a 50-50 split would be better. It would make life a whole lot nicer for doing this kind of job for sure.
I'm intrigued to see, and I'm pretty sure everyone is like, what's this transition going to do for the future of the industry? Because the way, yes, we have no final set in stone for any predictions of when this thing is going to pass for COVID, but when it comes to all these pandemics, they say that the way the timeline they base off, it's always 1 to 3 years. So it was the same thing for the swine flu, like 10-15 years ago. It was always a year to 3 years for it to pass by. But I'm really intrigued to find out how this improves the industry in terms of like what advantages this could bring, and like we discussed, there's benefits, there's pros and cons, etc. Some people have it worse than others, and we completely acknowledge that it's not easy to having to completely change your life. But I do agree with everything you said, that it is a completely different way of working, but the social aspect is the hardest one. Like me being myself, like believe it or not, this is the craziest thing, right? This is the funniest thing, right? Like yesterday, right, I was craving a McDonald's, man. Like I've not had a McDonald's in ages, and I was like, I want to eat some fast food and stuff, and I was like, nope. Take a step back. No, I'm not going out. Like I've literally not been going out at all. But I'm literally always doing sport all the time and stuff. And it's just, it's got to a point though that it's just like when you crave something, like you see all these people still doing like bad kind of social interactions and stuff. It's like you just need to know how to step back and keep your distance and stuff. But it is a tough one. Like there's lots of pros and cons. I'm intrigued to find out what's going to change with the industry.
Well, I hope it's. I feel very. That's a difficult one to say. Like, I think it's going to have a very positive effect in our industry. The way that things have gone at the moment, obviously not the illness and all that side of things. But once that's gone and kind of normality is restored a bit, I think it would be really, really good if it stayed 50% this wise. Because at the moment it sucks because I'm trapped in all the time. Like that, the prospect of working from home all the time right now is very unappealing because I don't interact with people. But if it was like normality, and I was working from home all the time, but I also could go on Friday night and meet my friends, local mates, go do something, and like it would maybe take like 6 months, a year to do, but I'm not going to be moving every year to a different city and having to restart my social circle. I'm going to have my social circle where I live and a job in a different place. Because I think it's, remember we said before, like teachers were teaching you super efficient, low poly modeling because that's how they learned, because that was the technology at the time. Like, yeah, we've got fast enough internet and everything connected now. There really is no reason why I need to move halfway across the world to do a job that I can do on a PC I've got in my bedroom. Because the internet's fast enough. I've got a webcam. I can put a VPN on if they want me to work with kind of privacy. There's plenty of stuff in there that I think is good because there's a shake-up. Because the same before, like Frames where it's technically impossible. Like it's not technically impossible. It's just they didn't want to make any changes. I mean, I wish it hadn't been like a pandemic that had done it, because it's not the best way to go about it, obviously. But it's nice every so often when something like this comes along and forces an industry to change, because it's got that bad side effect because it's all money driven and it's essentially based on what company can do it for the cheapest. Everything else kind of gets put out the window. They don't really think about the realities of people working. It's just if we can get the money out the quickest. So you do kind of need some kind of big shock to come along and be like, no, we need to change it. And then that's what will actually make an impact. So I'm hoping it sticks, because I think there'll be a lot of people who won't want to go back to the old way of doing things after this, because they've kind of seen like it's perfect. Also, I can work from home. I can do the same job. And so there's nothing that's stopping me from doing my job. So why the hell am I putting myself through so much discomfort for no added benefit other than a company's old way of thinking?
Dude, thank you so much for like literally everything you said, man. It's been insane. Like we've been talking for an hour and a half so far. It's been a pleasure. We've got probably like another 10 minutes to go because it's the madness now, the question time part of the podcast. But before we start that, I just want to say once again, everything that Ruairidh's been saying. I'll have all the timestamps, so if you guys need to go back to Pacific Park, you can check it out as always. Make sure to give him a follow. All his links will be in the description below. You'll be seeing it on the podcast as you guys have been listening on YouTube. Right, question time.
I know. Just add quickly then as well. Like, to remember as well, like this is opinion. It's not gospel. Like I'm not saying this because this is what I think, and this is what you need to think to have a job in the industry. It's my opinion of this stuff. It's not like don't suddenly think you need to throw out all your furniture and only keep your desk because that's the only way to survive. Like, no, do what works for you.
Yeah, of course. That's the thing. Like when it comes to doing this podcast, like the reason why I do it, obviously, is the stories. Like it's the different experiences, different approaches, and like I've learned so much from you, etc., and everyone who's came on, and just apply it, like you said, figure out what works for you, and take it from there. So when it comes to this part of the podcast, so basically it's almost like Would You Rather. So it's basically like Would You Rather in a way. So, but I'm going to throw a difficult one straight off the bat. Favorite movie and why?
Ooh. Damn, my mind's just gone completely blank.
It's like the whole an hour and 30 minutes of talking and now he's getting thrown this question.
Probably like the original Judge Dredd with Sylvester Stallone,
right?
Because it was.
I've not seen that in years.
Yeah, that was the first VHS I ever owned, so probably that.
VHS was the best. Can't beat VHS.
There's a lot of 3D films in that, I would say, because they were inspirational and blah blah blah. But honestly, just like the first film you have is probably the best one because it's the first one you get.
Yeah. Do you remember Blockbuster?
Why?
They were the best. You can't be. Never Blockbuster in Inverness. Did you ever go to Blockbuster in Inverness?
Yeah.
that was childhood right there.
And there's Harry Ramsden's next door. You get fish and chips in a movie.
Yeah, Harry Ramsden's just sorted. I remember the first film I got, I think, from there was actually Jurassic Park 3. I think.
Oh, nice.
Ages ago. Yeah, good film. Well, actually, a lot of people debate that. I hear I'm a massive Spielberg fan. I know he didn't. I don't even think. No, did he direct the third film? I don't think he did.
It's executive or something, I think.
Yeah, I think it was somebody else. Right. Because we were talking about this before the podcast, I had to throw this in. If you could mountain bike anywhere, where would it be and why?
Whistler, because it's the holy grail. Either Whistler or I think called the Mega Avalanche, like a massive downhill race in the Alps, and you have like 200-300 bikers at the start of a hill. First one at the bottom wins, and they go across like glaciers and down a mountain. It's absolutely bananas. It's like if you watch it on YouTube, it's insane. They do a version like you could Scottish like in Scotland. We like to take it and twist it into their own thing by putting Mac on the front of it. They did one in Fort William. It was Mac Avalanche instead of Mega Avalanche. They did it at Fort William. It was drastically more tragic than the original one, but I think like I'd love to go to Whistler because it's just I think that's that kind of place you could just get lost. You could spend 2 months there and you've still not ridden every trail. You could just go forever, and I could happily disappear in the woods and become a mountain man. That would suit me just fine up there.
Yeah, I've never heard of this. How have I not heard of this? Because I was saying to you at the start. So obviously, when I was growing up, I did lots of trails biking. So we're literally just talking about jumping off crates and walls and stuff. Growing up as a kid and stuff. The classic Onza days. You can't believe it. The funniest thing about my bike is like the best thing when I got my first bike, right, was it had the smallest seat in history. Like it was like I'd just be rocking in, right. It'd be so low down. It'd be like the smallest seat ever. I'd be like, what on earth is that seat? And then obviously you got the later models that came out with no seat, and then we're like, finally we don't need to sit anymore. Those were the best when it came to trails biking. Right, next one.
And it was like with Granny would always ask, so how can you sit down in that bike? It's not a sitting down bike, Granny.
Yeah.
Oh, what's the point of it then?
Yeah, like imagine that was your casual bike. Like imagine you went to the food shop, like trying to get your groceries, and you're just on a trails bike. They're like, what on earth is this guy doing? Right, would you rather read minds or control objects?
Read minds.
Oh, right, why?
I can make people control objects too.
Perfect. Genius, right? Okay. I was gonna say control objects because I was like, going MacNeill style would be brilliant, just welding the metal and stuff. I'll have the power.
Really, like, like say something like, I heard what you said about the boss in your mind. I didn't say anything. Now I can. How about you move that cup of tea over to my desk?
Best answer ever. I did not expect you to say that, man.
Pure blackmail.
Right, next one. Ant-Man or Aquaman?
Oh, jeez. Probably Ant-Man.
Oh, right, okay. Well, actually, because I'm not sure which I would go for. How come you go Ant-Man?
Because I think I found Ant-Man funnier.
Right.
And I've got more chance of getting that kind of body than a Jason Momoa body.
Fair enough. You're honest, man. You're honest. No, but Ant-Man, the cool thing though, right, is like, so Ant-Man, obviously his power is like shrink, whatever, and then go Gigantor, whatever you call it. I don't know the phrase. I apologize, my Marvel legends, but it's, I don't know, like I don't know. I'm gonna be cautious what I say here because I'm a massive superhero fan. I think I'm gonna have to go Ant-Man as well. I'm not gonna say my reasons for Aquaman, but I'm gonna go Ant-Man.
I couldn't take Aquaman seriously because there was had villains in it that had like the water helmets or whatever they were.
They just reminded me of.
Yeah, that's what I say. Like those like awful like Megazord Power Ranger things that would destroy. It just looked naff and cheesy. He spent this many millions in a film, like, put a good helmet on them. I couldn't stand them.
I think yeah, I agree with you there. When I did see it, I was a bit surprised about how it was designed. Like it didn't fit with the universe. I didn't think it didn't make sense, and but it did. I think it got the most. What do you call it? It's earned the most money out of all the what do you call it? The DC films, which was interesting to see.
A really good one. I think it was the comedian Bill Burr. I remember he pointed it out. If you look at the poster for Aquaman, he's got these kind of gauntlet gloves, and at the top they're open like a bucket. And he's like, for somebody that lives underwater, why on earth is these gloves designed so they'll catch water that you stand? It looks like a cup essentially. If you look at the poster, you'll see how badly designed it is. Like he's standing under a waterfall. And his gloves are just going to fill up with water because the top of them's open like a cup. It's just like a silly bad design. It felt badly designed to me. It was focusing more on the ripped topless dude than the rest of it.
I'm going to have to look into that. One. Right, this one's been always a challenge for I feel a lot of the guests because I struggle with it sometimes. If you could enter any video game, what would you choose and why?
Enter.
So you can actually become the character, or actually be a character. So your real self in a game. Like, are you going to go on the adventures of Uncharted and become Nathan Drake, basically, or are you going to what's your game that you're going to be diving into?
Oh, that Goat Simulator.
Wait, why? I've all the games in history you're going to go for Rudy. You went for Goat Simulator. You're going to have to elaborate this. This is going to be more depth than the modelling, mate.
I think I was just like
Goat Simulator. What?
Can you imagine the stress of being Nathan Drake all day long?
Okay.
Somebody's hunting. Yeah, enemy Tomb Raider. If you're Call of Duty, no matter where you are, you're in a war zone. There's no chill time. Now, if you're like a goat in a Goat Simulator, it's the biggest stress in your life. Like, I've not had grass for a while. I better go find something to chew. Like, that's an easy life.
That's the best. That's brilliant. What an answer. Right, okay. We're going Goat Simulator is then. Goat Simulator in the thumbnail versus Nathan Drake. Who's going to win? Right. Never use social media again or never watch movies or TV shows. I took a while to. I struggle with this one, but I ended up going with getting rid of social media. It took me a long time, but I ended up because at the day I need my Harry Potter. If I'm not watching Harry Potter, man, I don't know.
You get into the films, I think.
Oh, right, okay.
Because I enjoy social media too much because with the moving around so much. Like, I can't meet everybody like normal. I can't just go down to the pub and have all my mates there because they all live in different cities or different countries. And with the amount of time that I spend making films, I don't get as much pleasure watching them anymore because I've spent maybe a year working on something. Like, I still enjoy them, but I enjoy more hearing people's reactions or seeing why they enjoyed it or what they thought about it. I'd much rather be able to make a film or something and speak to people on social media and be like, what did you think about it? Get opinions. Let's have a conversation. That interests me much more than watching a film once and be like, cool, that was good. Now I've got nobody to speak to for the rest of the day.
So you've got the brains in these questions. I was too busy jumping the gun. Okay. I see which side you're going. Okay.
A film's gonna fill 2 hours of your day. What are you gonna do with the other 22?
Right. Next one. Control animals or control electricity.
Ooh.
So the reason of the electricity, right, was cool. There was this film that came out. I'm not sure if you've seen it. My brain's gone blank, but it came out on Netflix, and basically it was almost like a spin-off to superheroes. It was almost like X-Men, and the guy's power was electricity. He was an electric. It was a short film originally, and one of the main guys in it was from Tokyo Drift. It's a really good film. I highly recommend you to watch it. I'm trying to figure out what it's called, but I don't know if I would want to control animals. I don't know. Like, I'm intrigued to see what you'd say in this one.
I probably with electricity as well, because I mean you can train an animal. What's the point of controlling it? Like, I don't know, like a cat or a dog or something. Like, if it's trying to think about it logically, the animals I'm going to interact with is going to be cats, dogs, foxes, or pigeons. I'm not really dealing with too many exotic animals in the streets of London.
You said pigeons. You can just get. You can imagine being Glasgow, right? You just have your swarm, right? Your swarm of pigeons, and you just like, attack, get them all going.
I think take the electricity, and you can train an animal. Like, well, I could train dogs and pigeons and that, but I think probably go with electricity as well, because I've still got an alternative. I can train up animals myself.
Yeah,
but I can't really train electricity. It's a bit unbiased. You can't really persuade it.
I think you've maybe switched. I think I'm gonna go with the pigeons. Pigeons would be great. Just having an army of pigeons.
Oh no, I say that though.
Pigeons and seagulls.
Then Ace Ventura's just come to mind.
Oh yes, Ace Ventura.
Yeah, okay, maybe the animals.
That's the best answer. Yeah, okay, brilliant. Oh, dude, pigeons always get a good laugh. Cities of Scotland. I have no idea what's like in London, man. Worlds of pigeons.
Oh, here, it's super weird. The pigeon, I got toes down here. Because you got Glasgow, like the pigeons don't have feet. Like if you go like George Square and look at, like, they do have feet, but like if you go to George Square, a lot of the buildings in Glasgow, they've got like chemicals in the roofs to stop the pigeons landing on top of them. But the pigeons don't really care, so you'll see them like they've all got like clubbed, stumped feet because their toes are all rotted off by the chemicals. They don't do that down here. It's like that was one of the first things I noticed when I came here. Bizarrely, like, all the pigeons have got toes. That was one of my first impressions of London.
So it's like today's folks' the fact of the day from Ruairidh MacNeill: pigeons have toes. Brilliant. I did not know that. Right, interesting. No, but I know what you mean. That's one thing I can't stand is when. I can understand I don't agree with why they put all the sharp stuff. It's all because obviously they don't want any damage in that. But that's mad. I did not expect that. That answer. That makes a lot of sense.
Next thing you're past to Glasgow, just like in the bus station, you see them always like they're always walking funny, like big clubbed feet and stuff.
Yeah,
I've got messed up feet in Glasgow.
Gosh, right, fair enough. Right, the final question I ask every single guest: favorite cartoon as a kid.
Ooh, I Am Weasel.
Wait, I've not heard of this. Wait, have I heard of this? I don't know. I don't think I have. What is this?
It was a weasel and a baboon.
I Am Weasel. Time to Google. Right.
It's very hard to describe.
A weasel.
It wouldn't be on TV these days, I don't think. It was like a classic. It was a baboon. This baboon who could never do anything right, no matter what he did, always went wrong. And there was the weasel who was like the prime minister and spotless, and everything he did turned to gold. And it was just a comedy rival of like the baboon always wanted to be as good as the weasel, but with like early 90s mental cartoon like style. It's kind of like Roadrunner style of like the Roadrunner always gets away good, and but Wile E. Coyote always gets like a rock dropped in his head or exploded. Same kind of principle. Like just daft early 90s nonsense cartoons. There was no plot lines. There was no morals. You learned nothing from it. It was just stupid, I've come home from school. I want to watch a baboon get hit by a rock.
Why not? Like I'm looking at it now. I'm like, what on earth is this madness?
That went hand in hand with. I didn't know if you ever watched Cow and Chicken.
Cow and Chicken. All these names. Wait.
Oh, so they went hand in hand. That was another brilliant show. I think because it was the same time as like Johnny Bravo as well.
Oh, Johnny Bravo was legendary. Yeah, Johnny Bravo.
But I think if I remember right, I think Cow and Chicken was Seth MacFarlane worked on that when he was like a junior artist before he went on and did like Family Guy and all that. I think he was on Cow and Chicken.
Yeah, it came out in 1997.
Yeah.
Gosh, like it's crazy when you always think about it, like when you look back at like how many years now it's been since like your childhood. I'm like, gosh, like people always say it all the time, but like literally all the TV shows like you mentioned to the kids these days is all you hear is Fortnite. Like I love Fortnite. I think Fortnite's great, but it's always interesting seeing every guest answer because every answer is completely different.
Just watch, like after the chat, go and just all you have to do is watch the intro song, like the Kevin I Am Weasel, the intro song. In that 30 seconds, you'll learn everything you need to know about that show.
Perfect. Ruairidh, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on this show. It's been an absolute blast. Thank you. This is the longest podcast I've ever done. It's been an absolute honour having you on, diving into all these different topics. Most importantly, folks, make sure to go check out his work on social media, his ArtStation, you name it, his YouTube channel as well. He also does his Instagram as well. All links will be in the description below. Is there anything else you want to say, Ruairidh?
If you can join me on LinkedIn, I'm working on a project at the moment that I know for sure I can't finish by myself. So at some point in time, I'll be looking for people who can maybe do a wee bit of rigging. I'm trying to think of a good way to describe it. I've described it to a few people, and they've essentially looked at me like I should be in a padded room. But I had like a bit of a mental dream the other night. I was looking at a Dyson Hoover, and I thought, I think those like cordless ones. I got the new ones. I thought that really looks kind of like a gun. And I'd been watching, I think, Mythbusters or something. So I started turning a Hoover into a potato gun, like a vacuum gun. And it was just started getting out of hand. And now I'm making a stormtrooper that's made out of Dyson Hoover parts. It's going to be like a vacuum trooper that shoots potatoes.
Yeah.
Like I want to make that, but like my hope is that I'm going to use it as something that because it's completely pointless as a thing to have on my hard drive. So I want to give it away to people like to any students wherever who are looking for something to practice on. Like I don't want any royalties or nothing from that. So like if you add me on LinkedIn, that's what I'll post it when it's done. Like if you want it, you can get in touch and have it, and you can use it to rig or animate or do whatever the hell you want with.
Perfect. Yep. Everyone, so make sure to check it out. So thanks once again, Ruairidh, for coming on the show. It's been an absolute blast talking to you. As always, folks, if you guys are new to the podcast, don't forget to subscribe. As always, make sure to smash the like button. It really does help the channel grow. And with that said, folks, we will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.